Okay, the recording has started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the InstructLab weekly CLI community meeting. We have a few items on the agenda today. Just as a reminder, you can find the agenda in the calendar invite. I'm also posting it here in the Google chat. A couple of items today. First off is going to be Charlie with his brief demo on his CLI redesign, which we're hoping to get in this upcoming release, the 0.17.0 release. After that, Ali has a topic about the multiple backends design as well. And we'll do some discussion for those items. And then if there's time permitting, we'll review the project board for the CLI as well. If anyone else has anything they would like to add to the meeting agenda, feel free to add it as an item below Ali's item. But if there's nothing outstanding, then Charlie, I think you can go ahead and take it away.
Cool, thank you. And I do have sharing powers, which is nice. So thanks, Carol, for that. Application window. You should be seeing a terminal in a sec. Yeah, cool. I can see it. So I'm going to be demoing the new InstructLab CLI redesign today. We've talked about this a couple of times, but the gist of it is grouping the existing commands into resource groups, so like resources that InstructLab commonly messes around with. So we're hoping to get this into the 6.13 release, I think, or the milestone. I forget what the exact date is, but I think that's the date. So I'm just going to show vaguely what I've been working on. It's finally kind of working, so I'll just be showing that. So if you just run iLab, I just did this yesterday. There's aliases for the existing commands in the help text. I don't know if we want that, but I put them there just for this demo. So like things like model chat it is aliased. You can still run iLab chat and stuff like that. But in the actual commands, you'll really only see the groups now. So there's the config group, the data group, the model group. Sysinfo is a top level command. I figured I'd leave that there. And then taxonomy is a group. So like if I run iLab model, I hope this works, might not. It says the all the commands in the model group then, and there's commands like chat, convert, download, evaluate, list, serve, and train. So evaluate used to be test. We're converting it to evaluate just because of future work that I think we're going to be doing. And I added this one in this as well. We can go back and see if we want to actually include that in the PR. But iLab model list lists all of the models on your system, because currently there wasn't really like a way to do that. So I figured that would be a nice little thing to put in there, because the whole essence of this was to make iLab more of like an engine in the sense that deals with common data types that the like models, the configuration and stuff like that. And further down the road, we're going to be adding more commands that fit into the structure. That's why we split them out into these resource groups, because as the CLI grows, it's going to be harder to have everything under a centralized group. So I'll just show. I don't know if there's anything else specifically people would like to see, but stuff like iLab chat still works, at least for now. We might remove the. Yep.
Just real quick, model list. Is it listing from a directory or assuming a server is running?
It's listing from a directory.
Okay.
I mean, I see what you're saying, especially now that we have the bug fix that only like you can only chat with served models. That might be a cool thing to do. Or we can debate if this even needs to be in PR. I just added it.
I don't want to argue. I just want to know how it's working under the.
Yeah, no. I kind of did this for myself just because like as when I mess around with the different models on my system, it was kind of annoying to keep track of them. So I just printed them out in a table. But as you can see, stuff like iLab chat still works. So everything's aliased in Click. And yeah, so we're hoping to add different commands like iLab model top in the future to do like resource tracking for different model usages, and add different flags like interactive flags to automatically trigger certain behavior when certain commands are run. So really just making it more of like a full-fledged CLI that has more knobs, really, is what I was going for, and has sort of the concept of these are the resources that iLab commonly uses, and they're grouped in command groups, and we can add more commands into those groups. And the code is also structured the same way now. So This is not really a good way to do this, but you can see things like data models. So if I ls in a model, each of these like model.py is where the actual group for model is instantiated. Then each of these files, chat, download, etc., is where the command is stored and all the helper functions related to that command, stuff like that. So it's really a change in the way we think about the executing the commands and a change in the way the code is structured. Yeah, so that's just my demo. I just wanted to put it out there so people aren't totally blindsided when this comes to the surface. I know we've talked about it a bunch, but I figured I would show since it's kind of working now. Yep, Carol.
Yeah, so would the aliases be deprecated at some point? And if so, would there be like warning messages saying not to use it?
Yeah, I can add a warning message. I should probably do that in the alias commit on the PR, just to say like, hey, you're using an alias, but this alias might be deprecated. So I think the general plan that we have is to deprecate them. That's another discussion we should have, because I know a lot of tools that have aliases just as a quick way to access things. But in this case, I think at least with these top level commands like ilab model chat, aliases like that should be eventually removed, because kind of the essence of this thing was to make it clear, like, what are you chatting with? Like, what is the thing that you're doing? Like ilab data generate instead of ilab generate is a good example that I like to commonly use. Yeah. Take any other questions if there are any. It's pretty straightforward, but stuff like this I just wanted to show to the people. Yeah, Nathan.
So my question is, so this looks awesome. I really like how this is structured now. What steps are still needed, I guess, between what you've shown here and what we need to actually merge this into the main branch? Is the PR ready for reviews? Or is there any work that needs to be done before we start really diving into the code review? Anything else? Testing? Have the tests been rewritten so that they'll, I guess with the aliasing, the testing will still work, but we're going to want to have follow-ups. So the tests primarily use the new method and not the aliases.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time yesterday kind of cleaning up my commits, making sure they make sense. I think they're ready. There might be some gaps that I think reviews would actually help expose, and I can go back and fix those sorts of things. So I would say definitely ready for reviews today. I think it just failed linting on my last push, so I have to. I've been running it locally, but for some reason it's running into something else when I push it. But reviews definitely ready for those. The test should pass. You're right, because of the aliases, and then we're gonna have to go back eventually and fix up the tests, which should just be like changing the words of the test. That should be all it is. There might be some gaps because a lot of the changes I made were like consolidation of code, and as new commits come in, it's hard to track like, oh, did I pull the newest version of the code into the files that I changed? I went through yesterday and as close as I could made sure that I did all those things, and the commits look better now, so I think I got like 95% of the way there. But yeah, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would probably say then we should just have an issue that's like update the testing, like, just some generic issue that can be a follow-up to this. Looking at the PR, it looks like you're passing the rough check and the linting. I think it's the MyPy type check, which was implemented somewhat recently. So that's probably why that's suddenly failing. So yeah, I think these are all just sort of typing things, so it shouldn't be too difficult to fix that. But yeah, I will take a look at this later today. Go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, I was going to highlight the MyPy thing. That looks like what's failing. And some of it may be real issues. Some of it is probably because of code being moved or like new files. If you look in the Pi project top level config file, there was some configuration put there to ignore a bunch of files, because it was like, let's put the job in, testing files we know run clean, and over time adjust the config to where that link in chat, adjust the config as we clean up files. So it might be just fixing that config to reflect where code got moved to.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll go look at that, because I had to change some other stuff in the Pi project just for like what files to look for when building InstructLab.
I think it's totally fair to like keep that like just adjust that, Charlie. Like you don't need to go in and fix everything because you're already doing a lot in this PR. So I think you can probably just update that exclude list and that should be fine.
Yeah. As long as we're not ignoring code that we used to not ignore, if that makes sense, which I'm not sure if that's probably not the case, but that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is I did start like a more complete review in the hour before this, so I'm still in the middle of it.
Cool.
Work in
And yeah,
progress.
I totally understand that part of it might be like, hey, why is this here? Because it's kind of been a thing that's been kicking around for a while. I went back yesterday and tried to remove some of the extraneous stuff that I was just putting in just because. So I think it's kind of not to the bare bones point, but to the point where it's the movement of the actual commands, the addition of model list, and then the consolidation of the helper functions into helpers.py. And the reason I did that was kind of just because circular dependencies were becoming a weird issue because you have like a lot of them were in lab.py, so I couldn't import lab.py around all over the place. So I had to move them somewhere. And then while I was doing that, I realized that I was importing like, from InstructLab import config, from InstructLab import utils. So I kind of just consolidated them into a helpers file, which might have done some harm in the sense of Git gets confused when I'm like moving these things around, but it's kind of just a shuffle, but it might be represented weirdly on Git. There's no other questions. I can yield to, I think Ali is next.
Thank you for demoing this, Charlie. This is awesome. And we know you put in a lot of hard work. That is appreciated. Excited to start playing with this and get part of 0.17.0. And yeah, like Charlie said, Ali is next up on the agenda. So Ali, do you need to share as well?
One more thing.
Oh, go ahead, Sebastian. Yeah.
No, just real quick, because I mean, since we're talking about it, I don't have to put it in the PR. I think this PR is a good candidate to initiate the changelog.
Yes.
So if you could update the changelog with the feature in the breaking changes, that'll be great. And I'm not sure if we need to add the licensing back at the top headers. They seem to be missing all over the place. So I think we need to
The
re-add them.
SPX. Yeah.
Yeah, in the header.
Yeah, sorry, I might have missed some stuff.
No
when
worries.
I was just moving
No worries.
files, but I'll go back and
No
add
problem.
that, and I'll add stuff for the changelog.
Thank you.
Cool. Ali, do you need to share your screen? Do you have permissions to do that?
Let me
Looks
give
like
it
you
a
do.
try.
Yeah, you're a host, so you should be all right. If not, I can do it on your behalf.
Yep, I can share my screen. I cannot see if there are hands up, but
Okay. I'll keep an eye on the hands for you.
thanks. I just wanted to give an update on the Epic for iLab being able to support multiple backends. I've been working on adding VLM as a backend for iLab Serve. I made a very large comment on the issue yesterday with the design as I see it for adding a second backend and adding another backend and how that fits on top of the work that Charlie's doing. I'll be happy to go through this right now. And then I also want to talk about next steps with the group. I guess before I even go into this, Russell and Sebastian already commented. Thanks so much for the comments. You proposed I make a design doc. Is there some other repo I should be doing that in, or can we just keep iterating on the design here? I don't know, like if this is like within scope of something that needs a doc for it or not.
I think it needs something that we can review all together. Because like just putting comments and quoting comments, that's going to be a nightmare to come up with something concrete. That's why I requested a doc. But I think whatever is reviewable, like a PR, is good. But like commenting on the issue, I think it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean the PR was like very much a draft and a first pass, just to show everyone how things might look, or for me to ask like further questions. I know Christian had a lot of stuff on the dependencies and and installing VLM, and that was most of the work that I'd been doing. Actually, not is understanding that and not actually the code. The code is fairly simple. But yeah, sorry, Russell, did you have something to say?
Yeah, in terms of like a doc, I think issues are good enough until they aren't. So it's hard to say like where the line is, except for just sort of as a group deciding when we need a doc to so we have the PR flow to go through review and iteration. In this case, I think there's enough that a doc is warranted. My preference would be that to do it in dev docs. It's sort of like, we have some momentum going there. What I can do, like probably while we're still sitting here, is create a new CLI directory. There's others, like the CLI redesign, for example, is a doc that's already in there. We can create a space that's more clearly for the CLI focused docs and post basically what you have in the comment as a doc there, and we iterate from there. That's my suggestion.
Okay. How does this sound? Go ahead and make that subdirectory. Just shoot me the link to it, and I'll open up a PR. I mean, I'll just be copy and pasting for the most part what's in this comment, but there's no need for you to do anything past creating a space for the discussion to go to.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I know that we originally, the intent of dev docs was when something like touched multiple parts of the InstructLab org. It seems like we might be moving away from that definition, so maybe we should like document strictly somewhere like what dev docs is for. And it kind of seems like the definition that we're landing on is like anything that's a major code change in any of our repos, which is totally fair. I just wanted to highlight.
I think that's just what's working out in practice and what I think makes sense. I do think it makes sense to keep the design artifacts together, even when they're focused on a component. But if something is big enough or complex enough to warrant a doc, then I think it makes sense to go in our design repository where we're keeping it all together. We just got to keep it, we need to keep it organized, make sure that the workflow is easy for everyone. But I think I think it's nice to keep it together. And I can adjust in the README as a part of making this directory. So I'm doing that right now.
Cool. I'm gonna just really quickly go over this and some of the next steps. It was the next steps that I really wanted to focus on or have a discussion with folks in the meeting about. But so as Charlie mentioned in his design engine PR or refactor, that iLab serve is now becoming iLab model serve. The design I kind of started out with, or I toyed around with, or when I'd socialized the idea, somebody suggested that it should be iLab model serve GGUF for iLab model serve save tensors because you're serving a model, and I definitely understand that the model is the thing being served. I think what really got what was like a changing moment for me was that instead of specifying the format as the next argument, just making sure that the model path is always used in iLab serve. So the very first command I've got up in this issue is iLab model serve model path and the path to the model. The path can either be a local directory, a path to a GGUF file, or something else Llama CPP can serve, or a Hugging Face path. And the way that I proposed it is that iLab model serve auto detects or auto sets a backend depending on what the model path is. If it's a GGUF, then Llama CPP gets used. If it's just a directory with save tensors in it, then it's VLM. Or if it's a Hugging Face repo, there's VLM. The parsing, the code I have that actually does this is very crude. It was just a first pass at that kind of detection. moving past that, iLab model serve is the closest thing to iLab serve today, and it's the same as the one that I just mentioned. It's just that the model path is whatever the default model path is in the config file, which I think is models/Merlinite or whatever the default is that gets downloaded by iLab download. The commands get longer when you specify the backend. I know Sebastian had mentioned having a -- backend and giving the flag there. That was what I actually started out with, but I know for some of the training refactor, we're specifying a very specific type of train after iLab model train, and then there's arguments specific to that type of training after that. And I kind of treated this the same way, where the arguments after iLab model serve, VLM, or Llama CPP, or the next backend are specific just to that backend. And it's just model path and I guess log file that would be overarching regardless of backends. The other thing that I did was that I prefixed any of the flags or all the flags with the backend that they use, just so that there's no confusion over like GPU layers or max context size, which are things that which are overarching concepts that both backends support configuring, but they do have like slightly different terms around that. I haven't thought too much about this, about prefixing or not prefixing. I kind of like it just so that there's no mix-up from the user's point of view, but I definitely understand that it's a lot to type out.
Ali, can I make a comment real quick?
Yeah, and I think I heard at least one hand get raised.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
think I
me.
need to go through this stuff that much. The last thing I want to point out is that for VLM specifically, there's dozens of flags in their documentation. And I wanted to expose some of the more popular ones to the users and then just leave something blank so that if they wanted to pass something that's a little more obscure but necessary for their use case, they can just throw it in. But go ahead, Charlie.
Just one thing from before that kind of concerns me is I know we used to have a lot of flags. Or I think we still do because I don't think my training PR is merged. But like train is a good example where there's like, oh, local model directory and then model repo and stuff like that. And I want to make sure we don't get into the same situation with this where there's a lot of like stuff that's implicitly figured out from like the model path flag. I can't off the top of my head think of a better way than what you're suggesting, but it's just kind of like an overloaded flag. I don't know if that's the right move for model path, just because like if it can be a GGUF or safe tensor or a model repo, because there are those that means like that it does something fundamentally different, like downloads a model what based off like the what you pass to the flag, which is I again like I don't know what else we would do. Maybe have a separate model repo flag, but I just don't want to invite confusion with what the flags do, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think that like inherently models are represented different ways, and I think the user will be happier if we just figure it out for them and they just give whatever the model is, whether it's a directory of safe tensors, a Hugging Face path, GGUF, or whatever the other types are. But that's kind of my take on it. I definitely hear you that I like if I could this might be part of the design document or addendum I put is that I want to be very clear which flags are applicable to both backends and then have any other backend specific flags be very different and have that outlined somewhere.
No, it makes sense. I'm just more concerned about the fact that like when you download it from Hugging Face, it's not a path, yet we're calling it a path. Like I see what you're do it all for the user is great, but it's misleading in the sense of what the flag is unless you're looking at the help text.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be absolutely open to just changing it from -- model path to -- model, if that would be easier.
I don't know. That's almost more ambiguous. I mean, we can hash this out in the design doc, but the ambiguity of flags in the CLI is already kind of a problem. So I just don't want to
Mark's had it
introduce it.
for a while. I want to give him a chance
Yeah.
to talk. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so well, first of all, the model thing, it's very, very common with Hugging Face. You can use the name or a path. That's what that arg always is. So we'd be following a well-followed convention. But that said, we might have more options because we have the GGF and safe tensors and et cetera. So certainly we might iterate on that idea a little bit. I noticed you outlined your logic for deciding between various things depending on what the model path is. So that suggests there probably be some options in the future to say, here's the path and I want the GGUF out of there, or and I want the safe tensors. Anyways, we'll have to iterate on that. The same thing with the prefixes. I get what you're saying. It's probably debatable. Not disagreeing with what you're doing right now. I do want to mention though, where you have iLab model serve llama CPP, can we spend a minute on why llama CPP is another like sub command and not a flag? I think that's worth a minute.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, are you proposing kind of something, or are you asking like, why
Yeah,
isn't it just
Max,
dash
yeah,
dash
Max,
backend?
Yeah, I'm not really disagreeing. It just occurred to me that we should, again, see if we can clarify when do we use subcommands and when do we use like more flags.
Hmm. I don't have a great answer for that. To be honest.
All right, let me see
I
what
don't know.
what I was already thinking there is I think you did it right in that you want llama CPP to be a subcommand. I don't know if it's a submodule or not, but it seems to dictate what flags follow it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you articulated my thought process perfectly.
And I think that's probably the right thing to do there.
I feel like that's a little cleaner than doing dash dash backend llama CPP and then a whole bunch of, or some number of llama CPP flags. But I mean, I can kind of see it both ways. Are there other hands up?
Yeah. In practice, how often will people likely switch between backends?
It's a great
Going to raise
question.
your hand to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that people just stick to one.
Because
And
typically, when I look at projects that rely on supporting several backends, you set the backend once, and it's during like the initialization phase. You do like iLab init dash dash backend whatever, and then you're good to go. Then, if you want to switch and change it, you change the config file and set a different backend, and within the backend, you can go with whatever option the backend supports. That's also one way to kind of simplify things if people are not going to switch between backends like 10 times a day.
Well, I think we want to make it simple to have a teacher model. So we have two models though.
What does that mean? Like they switch backends often?
Yeah, so one's use a teacher like for generate and use a different model when you're doing chat and train and test and whatever.
well, so here's one thing to think about. Like that's much farther down the line is that, if we like start to bake evaluation into the CLI, then there would be another model that would be assisting in the evaluation in some context. And that model might be a completely different type of model. Like it might be, say safe tensors, whereas the one doing the generation might be a GGUF. But I'm not sure how the serving in that would work, or if it would just automatically happen in the background, like the way it happens with chat right now.
Something we could do that kind of fills both of these, have a config option that gets set when you init. And I know we've kicked this around for other commands that we're designing right now as well. Do something like iLab model serve that if you have something in the config, it auto either does llama CPP or VLM based off of what's in there, and then you can override it by just calling the command. I don't know if that is bad practice, but that could kind of fill both of those. But what I was going to say earlier is that I agree with the subcommand of the subcommand thing. Because like a lot of what we have in InstructLab currently is just like switch statements. That's like, if Mac OS do this, and it's like fundamentally different like functionality inside of the same thing, which I think is not the, for usability purposes, is we're going to hit a wall eventually where we add a lot of different features where they become just different in every single way, but they're in the same like core function. So I think this is probably for extensibility the right move to have sub commands.
Okay. For
Well,
the
it's
sake of time, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I feel like this is a bit stretching, but I mean, I don't want to point at you, Charlie, but I think the way you articulated it is because the code has that, then we should be doing this. And I don't think it's the right approach. You see, like you said, the code is structured that way. That's how it's done internally. Then that's how we should be surfacing it. And I don't think that we should be designing this way.
Well, more what I meant is that like train is a good example. Like the flags in the current iLab train, based off if you're on Mac OS or if you're on Linux or whatever, are completely different, but they are in the same function. And then internally, they just shell out to like, it's like if Mac do this. It was just an example. Is like the actual things we expose to the user in one function train get funneled into multiple things that it's unclear on the surface as to like where everything is going. So explicitly splitting it out in this way, I think makes sense. Because like Llama CPP and VLLM are good examples, which is what was called out earlier, that the flags are going to be different between the two as to what's being passed where, and having them in one serve function is going to be confusing, like for people that aren't super knowledgeable on these different things.
Well, I mean, even more confusingly is that they might both have like a max context size flag, but I don't know, maybe they're worded a little bit differently. And it's like, do we let max context size go for both backends? Then we figure that out for the user, like depending on which backend they provide, and like reword it and then pass that in, or do we just have it explicit like that? Sorry, go ahead, Sebastian.
No, I think it's great. I think everything all great points, but I guess to reiterate again about the serve Llama CPP versus serve dash backend. I think when we build the CLI, we have to differentiate between what is an action and what is like just an argument. When we do like iLab model serve is just like serve is the action, and Llama CPP is like an argument of the action. You know what I'm saying? Where if you start, then Llama CPP is not an action. It's just like an internal implementation of what the CLI does. That's why I don't think it's a good idea to have it, and I'm still pushing for dash backend instead, so that we have a clear definition of what the CLI should be doing and how it's kind of implemented under the hood. And it's like somehow when we do this, we're exposing backend code upfront on the CLI, and it's like duplicating everything. Or if you just have dash backend, then you just have dash backend and you pass a value, and then the code knows all the backends that are available instead of surfacing everything inside the CLI. Yeah. So
I just worry it's going to get clunky is what I'm worried about as we expand and have like more commands. Like I know this is unrelated and we shouldn't base designs of one thing off of another. I know, but things like the training dev doc that I have, it's like, oh, a hi-fi, lo-fi, or whatever we end up calling them, train command. Like those are the same idea where it's like shelling out two different backend code, but those are so fundamentally different. Like when we have just fundamentally different things, like starting a VLM server or starting a Llama CPP server, those are actions too. So I know it's like it's a implementation of doing the same thing, but it is a different thing that you are doing. We could argue, we could debate this all day. I think the dev doc is probably the
we will continue that in the
I've got kind of one final comment on this. Like, I would like to see this, like, whatever the most minimal subset of this work is, get merged as soon as possible, and I kind of want to talk about the next steps. If we started with just passing a dash dash backend flag, then in a future release, would we be able to, or even possibly the next release after we talk about, like really think about the design a little bit more, would it be possible to add the subcommands of VLM and Llama CPP? Or I guess like the way I kind of see it is that we would be able to go from dash dash backend to the subcommands, but maybe not vice versa or not the other way around if we make that call up front. Guess I'm trying to think of one-way doors versus two-way doors here, in terms of like the CLI and breaking the CLI and what our users experience over releases.
I mean, now that we know how to do click aliasing, we can probably wire something. I mean, as long as we have things between versions that don't break after we get past 1.0. I think if we're pre 1.0, I think it's fine, honestly. I think we've kind of made that precedent now. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would just do what's best, and we can wrestle with click later to figure out how to have that backwards compatibility, I think. Yeah.
Okay. The next things I kind of wanted to talk about, we talked about the UX, is the testing and the docs for the future. How does this change whatever our GitHub Actions do, adding another backend and our end-to-end testing? Like, would we have a second end-to-end test that serves VLLM? And would there be GitHub Actions for it? Because there are quite a few actions that like test Llama CPP specific variables. Somebody's got their hand up. I'm not sure who.
It's me and Charlie. I would probably say one of two things. We would either modify the end-to-end test to test both backends. That would probably be the better thing to do. The other option would be to introduce a separate end-to-end test, but an end-to-end test should really be testing like everything end-to-end. So I would probably say that we should either be doing like all the functionality with both Llama CPP and VLLM, or there are other ways. I agree with Russell. The test strategy should be in the design doc. Yeah, I mean, I think we could go either way in terms of like doing like two end-to-end tests that use different sort of inference backends. My preference would probably be to have it all be one test that runs like quite literally everything. There are pros and cons to both. Pros of doing like one single thing is that it's really more of a complete end-to-end test like we described. The con is that it would probably take a lot longer. I'm not sure if the cost of the end-to-end test stems from simply reserving the instance or the amount of time using the instance. If anyone knows that, feel free to chime in. But if it's the former, it actually would not be more expensive, so it would probably be worth doing it that way. If it's the latter, then there's a cost discussion to be had there. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
I mean, for an end-to-end test, you wouldn't have to go all the way through train. As long as the data got generated, then model serving as it currently stands would be fine. But the thing with VLMs, it still need, well, at least by default, there is a CPU variant, but or it does work on CPUs, but generally
you would have a GPU.
You use it with you use a GPU.
The end-to-end test uses a GPU-enabled instance. But if that was the case, what we could do is we could have the generation run, and then we could just add where it's doing an inference test with both Llama CPP and VLLM. So that would probably actually be the way to go then, because you would have that GPU enablement. So that would probably be the way to go. And that should probably be in the design doc. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, I was just going to say the way that I went about this in my PyTorch training PR when I added multiple backends is have one just be default, make sure the tests all work, and then have another one that tests like dash backend VLLM or something like that. Because at the end of the day, like we've seen VLLM servers running, they should be functionally the same in terms of like how iLab interacts with the server. The one thing is that the model path has to exist. VLM, I think, already validates that somehow. But yeah, I would just try to get something that works in terms of like a test, right? So like you have to have a test. It's just the least path of resistance might be having a default and then having a test that also tests the VLM server in that workflow file, I think is where the end-to-end tests are instantiated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind. And then the other thing I want to talk about was docs for the future. I know that there's an ongoing discussion of having the website have docs of some sort. I think this is the perfect example of the docs for this should go on like full docs and not in the README. I'm not sure what the timeline for that is. Do I just make like a separate doc file to put in the repo that's like readme-vlm or something like that for the time being for the initial PR,
Yeah.
or what do folks think?
I know there's concerns about like the README being too big, but I would honestly say, Ollie, just go ahead and add it to the README despite it being too big. And the reason I say that is not because I'm a crazy person, but because if the idea is that we're eventually going to chunk up the README and publish things onto the website, it's easier to have everything in one place to do that migration than start to like write other documents because the README is too big. Like if we're going to do that, we should just do it all at once. So my personal opinion would be like, go ahead and add it to like the README. And then, when we get stuff onto the website for documentation, it'll just be part of that migration. Of course, that's assuming that the docs tasks happen after this is implemented, not vice versa. If it were vice versa, obviously, I would say yes, add it to the website docs. But I have a feeling that this will probably go in before that work is done.
Yeah, okay, I'll consider that. I was hoping to, that's interesting. I was hoping to document like the behavior, if there's going to be auto detection, and was basically going to like have most of the content in here or whatever we put in the design doc in said document. But I see your point there. Kelly, do you have anything to add here if you're still on the call?
So yeah, I'm kind of reading through it as well. So I'm trying to see if this would be necessary there, because I kind of see with like newcomers coming into the README, it gets kind of complicated. This is more of a question. Is this like a task, or is this more of a kind of an optional thing? I'm still trying to understand it.
It's an optional thing. Basically, like it's just another option for iLab Serve.
Right. So in that case, I would document it where you would put it in the docs folder in the README, and then eventually we have it in like the website, and then in the README we link it from where in the README we say iLab Serve, we link it out to that that docs folder so that it's in the README, but it's not like a huge chunk
Yeah.
in the README.
Okay. I think I like that. I mean, I could add something short to the README that's like, if you want to use another backend, we support VLM, run this
Yeah,
command, and then if you
yeah.
want more information, go to the docs folder and like into a larger file.
Yeah, that's how I was thinking. I was still reading through how this was working, but that's kind of my forefront thought.
Got it. Okay. In that case, thanks everyone for the discussion. I know I took quite a bit of time, but this really helped me go through my next steps. I'll have a design doc up later today, if not in a few hours. And
Cool.
yeah, I'll probably try to work on the tests and the docs in parallel, because as some of the design discussion stuff is going on, just so that I have like some pass that I'm done. But the PR that's open is very much a draft, and don't take what's in there too seriously until I remove the draft label from it.
Thank you, Ollie. we have 7 minutes left, so I want to give the floor to, I believe this is BJ that added this to the agenda. If I'm wrong, I
Just have one
apologize.
last thing for Ali
Oh, okay.
on his design proposal. I think it's great, but I also think we should try to get into the habit of decoupling the work as much as possible. I think what you did as a kickoff is great, so that we essentially you set the basis of the requirements that are needed to install LLVM and stuff like this. I think it's good as a as a first PR, and I think decoupling that way is going to help the progress and and will make the reviews much more easier for everyone in the future. So if you could keep on decoupling all of this, maybe through issues, I think that'll be great as well.
Oh yeah. Once the design doc's through, I'll create a bunch of sub issues in the Epic, like one for testing specifically, one for docs, things like that. No, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, the Epic will get broken down into other things, and even whatever the draft PR have that's open and that I'll just be kind of throwing more stuff at the wall at. That doesn't need to include everything in it. I don't want to. I want to break this down as much as possible into small digestible pieces.
Great, thank you.
BJ, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, no, just quick. I just wanted to give a heads up that I've got the pull request done to take the schema files so we can stop using Git submodule and use it as a Python package dependency. I've been testing it out in the taxonomy repo and also on the CLI as well. It seems to work really good. So I think it's probably ready to start moving to it, but I'll probably need Christian's help once he's back from travel to confirm I've got it built properly and to figure out how to get it up into PyPy. But in the interim, we can still pull it using a Git plus URL from the schema repo.
Awesome. That's very cool. I added myself and Russell on there because we've been kind of doing something similar in the SDG repo, so I can take a look at that. I don't have the expertise that Christian has, so maybe can't replace that, but I'll chime in where I can and see what I might be able to contribute there. But this is awesome. Thank you for doing this. I think we definitely want to
Yes. Okay.
the path forward.
Hopefully, it will make lives a little simpler because people don't have to worry about Git submodule anymore.
Yeah, I think that'll be awesome. Cool. And the PR is in the. If anyone else wants to take a look, PR is in the meeting agenda. I'll put it here in the chat as well. Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this? Or anyone have any questions or comments? Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Well, we have 4 minutes left, which is probably not enough time to really review the board. So I'll ask, just if you have anything that you really feel should be in this release, please flag it in the front end channel in the upstream Slack. One other thing we should probably highlight is that there has been talk about potentially renaming that channel, having a dedicated CLI channel. Because I think I'm trying to find the discussion thread on that here. Here it is. I'll post this in the chat as well. So chime in there as well. We may rename that channel just to make things a bit more precise and maybe a bit more accurate there. I'll add this to the meeting notes as well. But yeah, so if you see front end disappear and CLI appear, don't freak out. But yeah, I don't think we have any other announcements or discussion topics unless anyone has anything they'd like to say before we close out here. Okay, well, I'm going to then stop the recording.